but put Q&A as well. Yeah, you can, yeah. Oh, you can.
Sika Sleep is live. Q&A.
Oh my god, I just burped into the... I'm so sorry. If I ever knew I heard that. Hook it into my veins.
You keep the lads entertained.
I can manage. I think I can keep a couple of guys entertained. I assume there's no female people in here yet, if ever. Can't imagine any female people watch the live streams. There's definitely a lot of female subscribers, but I don't know if they watch the live streams. Hello, just guys being guys. Good afternoon, Scott, Callum. You know where to find it. Seekstrength.com. Project Gouter, a regular morning project, Mr. Gouter, Mr. P Gouter, just guys being guys. Thoughts on Archam for Nerdinoff? Harsh it. I haven't watched it yet. The 109s, I watched the 102s this morning. I might do a double breakdown of the 102s and the 109s in one video, maybe, if people are interested in seeing that. So I think I hold off. So no spoilers in the chat if they're competing yet. I think it's on currently. Might throw it on. Just have a quick gawk. Archim obviously is my favorite Kazakhstan lifter currently lifting, although Nurgadinov is one of the Nurgisa, not Nurdinov. Nurgisa is he won the 102s this morning for very good lifting. Good evening from Beijing. Oh, Michael Mihal, what are you doing in Beijing? Very interested to see. I hope Derek Stells do a review of Sika Sleep. That'd be some advertising, but I don't think he'd give a fair review of Sika Sleep.
Who's that?
More plates, more dates.
Oh yeah. Will you hold on to your mic there?
I'm holding. It's too close now.
Can everyone hear us okay? We had to move around our mic setup yesterday. I still think we're still audible.
Alfie, afternoon. Will Sika Sleep always be available? Yes.
Forever and ever.
Forever and ever. Mr. Gouter, I was actually annoyed. That's the word I would describe when I saw Lesman and Miso just weighed in and didn't lift this morning.
No
I'm
way.
so fucking sick of people doing that.
Oh, I never saw that.
It's very annoying.
Obviously, they'll have to change the system for how you can qualify for the Olympics if athletes keep doing that.
Well, like, I get why they're doing it from the athlete's point of view, but
yeah,
it's very important for weightlifting that the best names compete. And it was one of the big things that made boxing so popular. And it's one of the things that made people still talk about the legends of boxing, like Sugar Ray Robinson, Tyson, Ali. Now, and even he had a big gap in his career. But there are people and many others that people still talk about a lot because they used to compete so much. And there's so many bouts that people watch and so many fights that people love to keep watching again. Whereas if in weightlifting, we keep getting this idea where people just weigh in, get the Olympics and stuff. And I know weightlifting is different, but it is...
no, you need to see the best lifters lifting against each other at the same count.
Yeah, it is a bit... it's disappointing when you go up and you're like, oh, you see Lesman and you see Miso, just names crossed out. And you're like, oh, fuck, this is...
Particularly for people who are paying to watch it. Like if you're paying to watch that, or if you get out of bed early, or if you stay up late to watch something like that, and then you see the two biggest names in the class aren't lifting.
Yeah, like no one had to pay for this one at least, but like say if you paid for Seb's one last time and you were hoping to watch Nino, and then you see Nino's on it, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Now, from an individual athlete's point of view, of course, I totally understand why you make the best decision for yourself. You play the system. If you're deadlifting, you sumo deadlift to win, but deep down inside you're a cheater. But you do what's best for you as an athlete,
Yeah. Okay, so today's live stream is for the launch of Sika Sleep, and Fractal is asking us to have like an elevator pitch for Sika Sleep. So Sika Sleep comes in. Do you have a box of it there, Griff?
Right there.
So,
I'm in top chat.
So stupid. So Sika Sleep, you get it in a box of 30 sachets. So it's a month supply. They're little sachets like this. So each sachet is 4 grams of supplement powder. You mix it with 250 milliliters of water and you drink it or you sip it slowly, like half an hour before you go to bed, right?
About an hour, say, right? So you've got zinc, magnesium, activated B6, sodium or salt, and vitamin C. Basically, what we wanted to do was get you the nutrients that you should be getting from food or need to get from food that are required to sleep. So that's basically it. So we weren't looking for things like pharmaceutical interventions that would help you sleep, non-hormonal interventions. We didn't want to use that. We didn't want to go the route of any herbal medicines or any particular herbs that may or may not be useful. Like, some people like, say, for example, ashwagandha before they go to sleep because it reduces cortisol, which is useful in the sleep cycle. We wanted things that were basically required for sleep in terms of a micronutrient profile that you need to get for your diet that would be very beneficial, specifically for people who train and who might eat very restricted diets or do a lot of training, and you essentially metabolize or burn through micronutrients a little bit faster, especially if you're in caloric deficits or you're eating the same foods regularly. We wanted to make sure that this was stuff that you need all the time, so you could take it as frequently as you need to, and you wouldn't have any weird kind of quirky side effects or anything strange like you might get from mushroom extracts or plant extracts, which do, I will totally admit, absolutely help people. But for this is literally what is required from an essential point of view for good quality sleep. Now, there's obviously other things needed, but these seem like the most impactful from our point of view and from the research.
It's a big thing as well. Like, we've used this for years, or different variations of what's in this for years. And we've used it with our athletes. We've used it with people we know. We've gotten people to take this particular blend itself for a long time. And it's a really useful kind of package. You use it every day. Just open your sachet, dump it into a small tumbler of water, and you're good to go. It's not complicated. You don't have to do any kind of particular timings with them. You just don't take it too close to going to bed. And yeah, it's a really nice, palatable, good tasting supplement. So if anybody is in Europe or Ireland, you'll know Loop de Loop ice creams. Do they have that in other countries?
I don't think so.
For the Irish people in this stream, you'll know what Loop de Loop ice creams are, and it tastes like the green part of a Loop de Loop ice cream.
That's what it does taste like, yeah.
So lemon and lime flavor. It tastes good, really palatable before going to bed. Obviously, no sugar or anything like that in it. So yeah, it's a great product. Obviously, we're going to say that, but it really is. It'll be massively helpful if everybody on the stream just popped into live chat and liked the video. It will be so helpful for us, because it really does help the streams to be kind of pushed out to more people. We would really appreciate it.
So Scott was saying, will it always be available? Yeah, so it'll be permanently. It's not going to be like the merchandise where we do drops. So this will be on the website permanently. It is important in regards to taking the supplement, or it's more beneficial to take it before you go to sleep. So people are asking this before. There was a couple of times people asked, like, does it matter when do I take it, and like, do I have to take it before I go to bed? So the interesting thing about magnesium and zinc is they're both known as what's Zeitgebers, or they're essentially environmental cues that impact your circadian rhythm or when you should do things. Magnesium and zinc are very, very related to this aspect. So it is beneficial to take them at certain times. For example, administration at different times. So there's a pretty interesting study I went over in the breakdown of Sika Sleep, where they looked at some human cell lines and some mouse cell lines and some eukaryotic, so some bacterial cell lines, and they were looking at the impact of that and the administration to mice on certain times of day, and they found that the administration of magnesium at different times of day didn't change your ability to go sleep beyond normal, but sleep at the correct times when you should be sleeping in accordance with the circadian rhythm did have a positive impact. So it is useful to take it before you go to bed or around that time. Uh, Good afternoon from Balrog. Panos Tak said, "Hello lads. On the weightlifting movement, snatch, clean, jerk, should the lifter focus on the position of the bar relative to the body, or the various angles of the joint to achieve good technique? Should the lifter focus on the position of the bar?" I'm not sure exactly what you mean when you're saying that. In regards to, so you're always focused on where the bar is, and you're always focused on your body's positions. Both of those are relevant. So you're trying to think about your body and the barbell being two separate centers of mass. And then as soon as the barbell leaves the floor, you get what's known as a combined center of gravity or combined center of mass, where you are in a tightly bound system and you are moving one way or the other. You're imparting directional force on the barbell, and the barbell is imparting force on you. Generally, the barbell's force is imparting forward all throughout the pull. So you get what's known as the forward toppling effect of gravity when we enter the system like this, because the barbell's center of gravity is slightly cantered towards the front of you. So it's pulling you away from it, because the barbell generally will be heavier than you and moving at speeds, and it's a further distance from you. Now, our idea is to essentially keep the barbell as close to our center of mass as possible, and then they converge at the extension point or the explosion point, and we should be in a nice tightly wound balance at this contact point. So you're always worried about your joints angles, but you're always worried about how this affects the barbell and how the barbell is moving based on these angles. So you need to take both of those into account. Michael said he's lived out here for about 15 years working in finance, but only started lifting 5 years ago. Michael, is there much weightlifting in Beijing? We knew someone working in Beijing, didn't we, for a while? In finance as well, actually. Funny that.
Yeah.
Then he was in Hong Kong, and then he was in Singapore. The world of
And now
finance.
he's in Australia.
World of finance bros.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder. I can't. I bet in us. I bet in China, like recreational weightlifting isn't that popular. It used to be apparently before, but maybe it's different now.
Okay. Sorry, Darren, just sending something off here.
Jason94 said, "Good afternoon from Sweden." Hello, Mr. Jason94. Nick H said, "Good afternoon, lads. Thoughts on wide versus narrow foot position in the snatch or clean catch?" So, generally, I suppose if you're talking about wide versus narrow, I'm going to assume you're asking in relation to outside what's probably normal for what you probably should be doing. So, the problem with very narrow is generally our knees end up in the way. So what we'll see is sometimes we'll see people use the frog stance very, very inconsistently. It's very, very infrequent that we'll see people actually using that frog stance. So with our toes, something like this, generally that's quite bad, because what we really want is knees to come back towards us in a normal pulling position. However, in the frog position or the frog pulling stance, we're not really going to be able to pull our knees back and maintain a good balance. We'll have this massive shift forward of our torso, and then we'll end up changing the torso angle based on that. So when we're in the frog stance, our knees are generally need to go out far out to the side. If we're pushing our knees out too much in the pull, we really don't want that, because we're not getting our knees far back enough. So the barbell is staying in front, is kind of pulling us forward, and generally won't be able to express enough power, or we'll pull out our shoulders back behind the barbell too early and not get a good extension. The wider stance is generally reserved for taller lifters or larger lifters. Sometimes we'll see people try and pull with a wider pulling stance, but the issue with a wider pulling stance is the fact that we lose a lot of this kind of force we can impact in the initial first pull, and to a certain extent the second pull. So we want to be able to use our legs in somewhat of a 50-50 balance with our back when we're pulling through the first and second pull. And if we go too wide, we're essentially reducing a little bit of the impact of our legs in that first pull, which is very, very important. Not only that, if we go too wide, when we want to jump into our catch position, and did you ask about catch position in the snitch, or thoughts on wide? Oh, you're asking about catch. So when we end up in the catch position, we have to move our feet in if we could pull very, very wide. So when we're catching with a very narrow stance, generally we're quite off balance. Most people won't have the requisite thoracic mobility, ankle mobility, and potentially elbow position and elbow extension to sit nice and upright with a locked out barbell if we're too narrow. Generally, if we're too wide, most people won't have the requisite hip mobility to sit into the bottom position. And generally, if you catch too wide, you're not able to get as deep because you lack that hip mobility. And it takes a longer time to get into that wider catch position to go from that normal pulling stance to an uber wide one. Um, Scott, thanks for letting us know that. Actually, did you see that?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
already been sent off. So, guys, anyone who's trying to sign up for the subscription on their mobile, on a mobile browser, we're just having a quick look at that now. So we're chasing that down. Um,
hmm. Ordered by Jace, lads. We will. Thanks, Kevin. Somebody show that thing sorted.
so if anybody does have any other questions as well, this is a very, very good way of getting instant contact with us. As always, it would be great if you guys could like the stream. We massively appreciate it.
Luke said he hasn't slept through the night since he's moved in with his girlfriend, or his girlfriend moved in with him.
Hector then says, "What a naughty boy."
That's actually very common for a lot of people. If you go from sleeping on your own for a long time and then you go sleeping with your partner in the same bed as you, it can be a big disturbance. But what's funny on that is when you come out the other side, eventually you'll get to a stage where sleeping by yourself will become abnormal, and you'll
Yeah.
find it difficult to sleep sometimes if you're sleeping by yourself
Mm.
in certain situations. So it's funny how that goes. It's a pendulum, a vicious, aggressive pendulum.
I'm so thankful for just seeming to have been born with one trait of being able to fall asleep almost anywhere.
That's because your mother dosed you with Valium when you were a child.
James Mawiney Dara O'Brien has a good question. I think you're starting deadlifting twice a week. My current max is 240. Is deadlifting twice a week optimal, or is depend on recovery speed from session to session? So I wouldn't recommend that, Dara. Um, Deadlifting twice a week. Oftentimes we see like a stalling out of the deadlift or maybe a plateau in the deadlift, and we try and hit it harder in order to fix it. That works very well for strict pressing, works very well for bench pressing, works very well for a number of things. Just doing more of it helps us. In the deadlift, it almost never works
He
to
said
do
twice a
more.
week. You think it's three times a week,
I
bench?
still don't like twice a week. I prefer people to deadlift once a week for the majority of their year,
Mm-hmm.
and then in periods do like an 8-week block where you go twice a week, or maybe kind of 10 weeks where you go twice a week, but only in kind of certain cases. So even in the cases where you're deadlifting twice a week or trying to go from 2 times a week to 3 times a week, you don't want the intensity to be incredibly high on those. Obviously the deadlift is unbelievably fatiguing, and what I'd offer in kind of opposition to that, or in a kind of opposing to that, would be I'd really focus on your back squat, and in particular your high bar back squat, and focusing on adding kilos to that. It tends to be an easier lift to add kilos to, tends to be less fatiguing overall to your system, and it actually carries over far better to your deadlift than just simply going more than kind of like from once a week to 2 times a week to 3 times a week. So you can definitely go to 2 times a week in certain cases for kind of brief periods, maybe for 8-week blocks or a 10-week block. You might say, for the next 2 months, I'm not going to be squatting crazy hard. I'm going to really just give this time to my deadlift. In the case where it's technical corrections you're making in your deadlift, or might be some specific grip issue or some specific technical issue you have with your deadlift, doing a specific block can help with that. But I don't like the simply do more deadlift to make your deadlift better. I actually don't like that option for those.
It's funny with the deadlift is that there's like a drastic fall off. There's a serious case of diminishing returns when it comes to deadlifting. Like, so the twice a week is very useful for periods of time for sure. But there's just never been a case where I've had to give a lifter, for example, 3 times a week, and I mean absolutely never. And I've never looked at anyone. I never thought of a scenario where 3 deadlifts from the floor is the beneficial thing to do. So if we're not including RDLs, or we're not including maybe some related stuff like that, but generally it's either like those 2 variations or twice a week is the maximum you'd ever go for people. And the bench, the upper limit is like it can be 2 to 3 times a week. 3 is generally the sweet spot for a lot of people, and I know sometimes people kind of get to 4, but that the diminishing returns are pretty high in there. But the frequency in relation to the deadlift compared to the squat and the bench is so funny that it's like very definitively more than two, definitely bad.
It almost doesn't make sense.
If you're stuck in a rut, yeah, it kind of doesn't make sense, to be honest. But if you're stuck in a rut, a bit more frequency is probably warranted. Given that you're at 240 and you've been deadlifting once a week to 240, I would definitely give a block of twice a week for 8 to 12 weeks and see does it get you over there. But as Adara said, I'd probably be looking at your squat first and seeing where your squat is. Has your squat progressed? Has your quad assistance work progressed? And has your upper back pushed?
You know, one case I'm thinking of where this actually pops up quite frequently is weightlifters going into powerlifting. And then suddenly they find their back squat's quite good. Their bench press might need some work, but the deadlift is something that kind of doesn't react as well. In those cases, the increase in frequency will give them that kind of extra attention that's needed. Okay, James Mawhinney. I'm sorry if
I'm gonna
that's
say Newfoundland, Southern Canada, Northern
Mawhinney
Mawhinney
in the mountains.
in the mountains.
If you were creating a powerlifting style sport, 3 lifts, 3 attempts,
Power clean,
which lifts would you pick?
split
Just
jerk,
personal preference, and why would it be the
back
back
squat.
It would be power clean,
Yeah,
back squat,
Yeah.
100% for sure,
yeah, full depth.
and full depth. Yeah.
You have to figure out a way of anatomically.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I do?
What?
Because it's not that hard.
Hit them.
No, you'd put a marker on their knee and a marker on their hip,
Mm-hmm.
like you do in every single biomechanics study ever. Literally, first year sports science, you're like doing some biomechanical things. You put a little marker, knee and hip, and it's so easy.
You know what? If you just can't squat below parallel, you're not allowed to compete.
Yeah, but
What I do is it's actually really easy. It'll be like a what they call it in rallies when they're inspecting the car. What's that name?
scrutineers.
Scrutineers. When everyone's warming up,
Yeah,
you just look at their high bar squat in their sleeves and shoes and belts.
it doesn't even have to be a high bar, but they have to be bottoming it out.
Yeah, seeing obviously not like stupid like you're trying to sit on the floor. Like,
Yeah.
Like it still needs to be an anatomically safe squat.
Yeah.
Like a still a powerful squat, but as deep as you can get. Like you can't be cutting that.
No,
You can't squat outside like shoulder width.
I think you just look for the bony process on your knee. You place a marker there. Same way when you go to run a 5K,
Mm-hmm.
they put the little marker on your ankle for timing and they give you a number. They
Power-
just marker on the knee,
Yeah.
marker on your femoral head, and that's it.
Like in race walking, they have a thing where if your feet, both of your feet come off the ground at the same time, the electronic system flags, you know. So they used to have judges. So surely you could come up with something
Do you
in
know-
what?
Interesting story about race walking was
Air on steroids.
no,
Okay.
they are, but
Right.
in race walking,
Mm-hmm.
the technology got to the point that it could track the feet being off the ground when a human eye couldn't, and they actually had to retract and pull it back, and now it's only able to track what the human eye can see
Oh, because it's too
because
severe.
it was too severe.
Okay.
And then you had people in training, like you have to be able to train, and not everyone will have this system.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's visible to the human eye where the feet come off the ground at the same time.
But you know what's more interesting than that? When a horse is running, all 4 hooves are off the ground at the same time.
That's
Yeah.
madness, isn't it?
But yeah, power clean, back squat.
And then I think some sort of overhead lift. So you can do it like you can unrack it. Oh yeah, I think like a jerk from the rack, but you can do it off your back or your front.
Get the barbell overhead.
Get the barbell overhead, doesn't matter.
CrossFit call it shoulder to overhead. So it's
Yeah.
like shoulder to overhead. You have a rack. You could clean it if you wanted.
I'd like to see the power clean being like you can power clean it just about parallel, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I think we could actually use the same marker system for the power clean as we would for the back squat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And it's an ascending barbell.
Yes.
And there's just no
Yeah.
You're just literally like the barbell goes up in certain
5
jumps.
kilo increments.
Well, maybe
8 kilo increments.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very watchable competition.
Is there a principled way to Max Offerman? Is there a principled way to figure out the ideal weight class for BJ, like shortest in your weight class or lean body mass at 27? Do I just have to try out different weights? I actually need to just please stop restricting yourself. If you're under the age of 25, please stop cutting for weight classes. Please. I'm actually like, unless you're going to go to BJ Worlds, that's what my main thing is here for anyone watching this, for any fight sports. You're actually holding yourself back. If I had a club, I wouldn't let any of my 21 and under cut weight. You just wouldn't be allowed.
It's the 21 and unders is a big thing.
If I knew you were cutting weight, I would ban you from competing, or I'd potentially ban you from the club, because it's. I think it's. Well, I don't think, I know it's bad for your long term development. Caloric restriction in teenagers is not a good idea, and we want to maximize your long term performance as much as possible. This is one of the great things from the Soviets, when we kind of got that huge cohort of elite athletes going through a system over a number of decades. They had great data, and they were adamant that, they're not even adamant, they had data to back up that if younger athletes cut weight too much, they consistently held back their long term results in the weightlifting movements quite significantly, because they wouldn't be able to make up the weight they should have gained based on their projected body size and what the weight class they probably would end up in. And Soviets did a lot of unethical things, but they were very good at recording data. So, but we can infer this in ourselves. If we're holding ourselves back at 14, at 16, at 18, eventually you're going to get to a stage where you've run out of puberty. You're not going to have mass amounts of endogenous testosterone, growth hormone, all those good things. You're not going to have all that fucking serotonin, dopamine that you should be having as a teenager, that motivates you to train multiple times a day, reduces your pain tolerance, increases your pain tolerance, your ability to gain muscle mass, size. All of that is hugely exploitable for those years. And if you're restricting calories for the sake of fights as teenagers, which may or may not matter that much, this, like, it's in no way a big deal, but it's really important as a younger athlete that you don't cut weight that often. Look, if it's half a kilo, it's fine. But if you're in the same weight class the following year until the age of 20, you're not doing it right. Unless for some fucking reason you're 6'5" and you're 140 kilos. For anyone else, anyone in the double digits, you probably should be in the same weight class year on year. Certainly not every year and a half. Every year and a half increment, you should be moving up a weight class, or at least not cutting down to that weight class. Now, for adults, it is different. So if you're, let's even say 23 and plus, as a reasonably well developed athlete, if you've trained, first place to look at is competition experience. So how many competitions have you done? In any sport, it doesn't make sense to cut weight initially. It's too stressful. There's too much else going on in competitions, where cutting weight is just not a good idea. Once you've got your initial competition experience out, or you can delay your initial competitions, and the most important thing to first look at is your body fat percentages. So there's a good chance in BJJ that you've probably started as an adult, or what we call onset of adult athleticism, or UAS. There's a possibility you're a freak of nature in your horse, you've done all the training and you're ready to go, or you're not in great shape, you don't have a lot of muscle mass, you have more fat mass than you should have. So where do you start then? Then you start looking at just getting in better shape and seeing what weight class you'll end up in. So if you're maybe, I suppose, the kind of prototypical skinny fat, you haven't done a lot of training before, or you haven't trained in a long time, your muscle mass is low, your fat mass is in the kind of 18 to 25% body fat region. From there, then you want to be looking to get into a lower, more sustainable body mass, a healthier body mass, or a fat mass, I should say. So you want to be looking at something kind of in the region of 12 to 15%. And if you're in that region and you feel like your conditioning is good, then you can slowly start to look at, as an adult, if you need to change weight classes and you're competitive. And then you need to look at the balance between, how does this impact my life? How does it impact my competitive career? How important is my competitive career to me? How much does it impact the people around me? If I have to cut weight, how much will it impact my health? If I have to cut weight, is it a good thing for my health? Is it a bad thing for my jiu-jitsu? Is it a good thing for my competitive nature of my jiu-jitsu? It all depends on a lot of different variables. But as an adult, I feel like the first place to start is body composition. Start with, are you in good shape? Are you, and this kind of goes for all weight classes, to be honest, for all athletes, and not even weighted sport classes, open weight classes like field sports or anything like that. As adults, we really need to be looking at it long term, and I know a lot of adults get this. It's hard to impart into a 16-year-old why you shouldn't take SARMs, but it is easier to tell a 35-year-old that, look, you don't look, you might squat more if you're 25% body fat, but it'd be a whole lot better for everyone if you weren't, for you as a person. So first place to look at what's healthy for you, what's sustainable. And if you're on the cusp of weight class and you're a kilo over and you've done a couple of competitions and you're in a healthy body composition, yeah, makes perfect sense to cut down. There's no reason not to cut a kilo or two or do a little water loading. But if you're going through these competitions routinely where you're absolutely obliterating yourself, and BJ's fight sports are probably the worst for this in terms of weight classes because they get away with it more in competition where you're starving yourself for like 2 weeks ahead of the competition, but you're doing 4 competitions every 5 months. You're starting going to negatively impact yourself in ways that aren't really beneficial for your jiu-jitsu or your health. So I'd be looking at body composition, how you're feeling, how it's stacking up with weight classes, how important competition is for you, and this competitive nature is, and how much it means to actually win. And if you're taking all those into account and you're aware that, look, I understand that 6 kilos a week's competition is a lot, but I really want to win this competition and it's more competitive in a lower weight class, then okay, great. But if you're recreationally bound and you're in it for the long run, then be more sensible, be in a really healthy weight class. Ideally, you wouldn't have to cut at all. You wouldn't cut weight, and you'll have a much better time.
It's I would, my general recommendation for everyone, this is the same as Garth, but you need to just be in the best shape you can possibly be in, and then figure out where that lives within a weight class. Like, you don't necessarily need to be at the top or the bottom of the weight class, but you just need to be, what's the best shape you can be in for the things you like to do. Like, if you like to lift weights as well as do jiu-jitsu, then it's probably a bit better if you're a bit heavier, a bit bigger, carry a bit more muscle. If you like to go out hiking, or you like to do rock climbing or bouldering as well as doing jiu-jitsu, sit a bit lower down, have a little less muscle mass.
Yeah, that's
like
that's an interesting case actually. Yeah, when it's like, okay, the nature of your sport is forcing you to go down.
Yeah. Because I know for hunting for us, if I'm 108 to 112 kilos, my squats are way better.
Yeah.
But then for 6 months of the year, I'm really out of breath.
Walk uphill and your lower back is like,
oh my god.
Whereas if you're hunting and you're 95 kilos, it's like, you're like a German power bike.
Yeah. Cross country skiing.
Yeah, you're ready to roll. So it really depends on a lot of variables, but I'd like to start with health first. And there's a lot of arguments.
Oh, health first. You want this diatribe again?
A healthy body fat and body percentage is better performance because you'll feel better, your energetics will be better, your blood pressure will be better, and all that. And look, there's always Clen T3 and T4, That's all I'll say.
B says, with Sika sleep, can I stack it with my athletic greens, staring at the sun and from my punch pool as per the Huberman protocol?
I don't know if this is a joke because a lot of people do Huberman's protocol stuff. So the answer is I don't know what's in athletic greens. I'm pretty sure, on a serious answer, they have a proprietary blend from what I know. I don't know what's in there. So I'd say you'd really have to look at what's in it. Just be conscious. I know they do like a lot of different things in athletic greens. Do you know Huberman is on the business team for athletic greens? So he makes it seem like he's sponsored by them, but he joined the business team. I think he joined. Is he one of the directors?
God. Yeah.
Just saying.
Athletic greens have been around for a long time.
He's getting a lot of flack lately, isn't he? Huberman.
He's
become a bit of a meme, and
through
no fault of his own.
You know what?
Yeah.
Anybody who becomes that popular ends up being a meme. Like, everybody, if you reach a certain level of popularity, can you think of anyone who's really famous who doesn't get some sort of label as being a quack? I'll wait.
And just on the Huberman thing, while we're talking about him, there's a lot of people from the more scientific side of things who accuse Huberman of what I would call a data optimist.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
But I don't know if they're just really narky because they're not famous scientists too, or you think they're correct.
They're 100% correct.
Yeah.
You see Huberman, and this is nothing against him, he puts out some great stuff. But anytime someone is like, oh, there's these 1 or 2 or these group of 4 papers that look like we get this small percentage increase in whatever, that really doesn't mean anything, no matter how significant the results are. You need 15 years of information that have been those repeated studies over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Then you need a meta-analysis of all those.
Well,
and then you can start saying,
well, no, I think, you need mechanistic data as well, I think that's as valuable.
You definitely need the mechanistic data, but when it's one study
Mm.
or 2 or 3 studies, that really doesn't mean a whole pile.
Well, I think it just depends on the subject, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
depends on every individual subject, like, because biology is so complicated.
Yeah.
Um, you know who's a real life Huberman is Alex Kegel, I think. The guy.
Alex Kegel.
Alex is doing my nutrition at the
If
moment.
you want to see
Oh my god.
some very, very good, what I call Alex is just a very good science communicator.
He's a science implementer.
Yeah.
He's amazing. Phenomenal.
Yeah. Hugo Plummer says, what's a good squat, pull, press numbers in order to snatch 100 kilos?
That sounds like a porn star name. I can lie, Hugo. Hugo Plummer.
Hugo, I hope you have a massive mustache.
I was going to
and
say
a fake tan.
Massive something else.
So we were talking about this a few weeks ago. There's minimum numbers you need to snatch 100 kilos, right? So you obviously need to be able to hold 100 kilos over your head and stand up out of a squat with it. So you can say the squat has to be above 100 kilos. In reality, the squat has to be above 135 to 150 kilos. Now, I'm saying that with a massive caveat next to it.
That's really
because
low.
I think for most everybody, you should be squatting 180 kilos or somewhere around that in order to snatch 100. So this is going for normal populations. If you look at the thousands of people who have run our programs, the hundreds upon hundreds and probably into the thousands of people now at this point who we've coached like one-on-one, handling every aspect of their training, most of the time you want to snatch 100 kilos. Having a squat that's approaching 180 kilos is very, very useful. Is it 100% necessary? No, you can do that 100 kilo snatch with a far lower back squat, but it's far easier and you get there far quicker when your back squat numbers are much better. In terms of your strict press, I think your strict press should be around 70 kilos. It can be an awful lot worse than that. I know for me, it was an awful lot worse than that. It was around 50 kilos or 55 kilos, and probably stayed at around that most of the time I was weightlifting until the kind of later years. But you should be constantly trying to get your strict press to increase. And just twice a week of strict pressing as a normal part of your accessory routines is perfectly ample in that case. Your strict press will be constantly improving, and a heavier strict press will allow you to snatch far, far easier. More importantly, it will allow you to have a far high quality or far higher quality of snatch across all of your training. So it's not necessarily about the one single at 100 kilos that matters. It's about the 5 sets of 3 at 80 kilos that really matter. And the relative quality of those will be far higher when you have better strength numbers. It will also mean that going from the first rep of those doubles to the second rep of the 6th set of those doubles at 80% will be far, far higher quality when your strength numbers are better. So it's just about more consistency across your training blocks, and therefore having better quality training blocks and your ability to improve faster because of those higher strength numbers. So if I was to put an exact number on it, your squat has to be above 100 kilos because you have to squat more than 100 kilos. If I was to put a lower end on it, I think I had a 15-year-old this year who did 101 or 102 kilos with a 135 kilo back squat. He was just a light athlete, very, very talented. But most of the time, approaching 180 kilos, I think, is a more appropriate number.
I cannot think what I did when I snatched 100. I'm going to say like 160 maybe?
Mine was like 175 or 180, I think. And I was weak.
That was a box squat, was
I
it?
was weak. Yeah, it certainly didn't look like a high bar back squat. Okay. So it does look like there's some issues with the subscription, guys. If there is an issue with the subscription and you want to sign up, once we get that sorted, just pop us over an email. We'll get you onto the subscription service. We can get you there with the cheaper rate on your order. But just get the order in today just to make sure everything is good, and pop us over that email afterwards. Rob Poutney says, how to overcome a mental block in the catch for the snatch. So the first thing you should do is watch the Sika psychology video on this, because we go into it in quite a lot of depth. I'll have a look after I answer this. I'll have a look for the specific name of that video, Rob, and I'll pop it in the comments down below. There's a couple of things you need to consider here firstly. So the first thing is dropping underneath the snatch or not being able to drop underneath the snatch most of the time isn't a psychological issue in terms of your conscious psychology. So most of the time, it's not this thing that you're afraid of it, or that you're kind of worried about getting underneath the bar and you're inhibiting your ability to get underneath the bar. Most of the time in practice, you have a subconscious inhibitory pathway. That means your body is saying, oh, my quads are giving me some feedback, or my lower back is giving me some feedback, or my balance, my inner ear is giving me some feedback. I don't feel confident in this position, and your body will subconsciously limit your ability to get underneath the snatch. This is the same psychological or subconscious monitoring system that will allow us to not punch a wall 5 times as hard as we possibly can. Most of the time,
Is there a name for
yeah, it's again, it's like subconscious inhibitory. I can't think of it. Basically, you won't be if you try to run into that wall as aggressively as you possibly can. You'll stop yourself. And
That's you think?
yeah, I don't want to say I'd implore you to try and do it now, because I obviously don't want you to try and do that. But you'll find yourself pulling up, or your hands will come up in front of your face. Um, so that's most of the time what's happening in the snatch. So that's probably happening because you might be pushing the weight a small bit too much. You might be approaching super maximal weights in the snatch. You mightn't be able to do it. But it could also be something like a movement restriction, which means when you sit down into the bottom of that squat, you're not hitting that position perfectly. Your body kind of feels something, whether that's some feedback from a muscle spindle or from a Golgi apparatus. It might be any of these things where your body just says, no, Fitz, you're actually not doing this correctly. And then you might need to address that through some specific strength work, through some stability work, through some balance training, through some range of motion stuff like static stretching, or some myofascial release work. So that's the first thing, is that a lot of the time it's actually not you consciously stopping yourself getting under the bar. It's nothing to do with you being afraid. It's there's some deficit there that your body is picking up on, and you basically need to work on that deficit. The second thing then is that this is a very simply fixed problem. So this is actually something we come up against in training camps all the time. We'll have people who will have a certain number. They'll say, once it goes above a certain number, I start power snatching it, or I can't drop underneath the bar as quickly, or I'll keep clerking this weight. And what you really need to do this is, like, you can call it killing it with kindness, or you can call it smothering it, is what I prefer to call it, which has actually become a bit of a meme among the people who come to our training camps. You need to smother that issue slowly. So I'm going to take the example of a 100-kilo snatch, because the numbers are quite round here, right? So if you're trying to snatch 100 kilos and you commonly clerk a 100-kilo snatch, what I then want you to do is I want you to regress back from that and find a number at which there is no hesitation at all. For most people, that number will be around 75 to 80% of that. So you stay on the conservative side. You say, I'm never going to go above 80 kilos in the snatch. You will do that for a number of weeks. You'll start off probably just with some 80-kilo doubles and triples. Then you'll go to 10 singles at 80 kilos where they all look super crisp. Then you bump that number up slightly. You'll then go for a few singles, maybe 2 or 3 singles, 82.5 kilos or 85 kilos. Once you've able to do those 2 or 3 sets of singles at 85 kilos with no hesitation, no limits on any of that, you'll go and do some doubles at that 85 kilos. Maybe you'll even do some triples at 85 kilos. And then you bump it up again. You go 87.5 kilos or 90 kilos. You do some really crisp singles. Then you do more crisp singles. Then you do some very good doubles, maybe even some very good triples. And you just sneak up on those weights like that. So when this happens, when we get that kind of subconscious limiting, or that subconscious inhibitory feedback that we get that stops us from being able to get underneath the barbell, we need to back way, way back from the problem. And then we really, really just smother that issue. We really just make sure there's no possibility. If you've just done triples with 95 kilos the week before, and now suddenly you're not able to get under 97.5 kilos, that's an impossibility. That simply never happens. Most of the time, we get that subconscious limiting. We've just jumped a bit too quickly. We've gone up there a bit too fast, and we actually need to just reverse back a small bit.
Bernard Ewan, is that I feel like I butchered that. I think multivitamins daily, which contains vitamin C, magnesium, and zinc. Will that affect Sika sleep? I recall your recommended ZMA was in a very specific portion. So, uh, and just on the ZMA thing first, ZMA was, I think, proprietary, mostly because they could make a proprietary blend and they could copyright that blend. So zinc, magnesium, and B6 was not a thing that they could copyright or make put a patent on, as obviously they're just essential vitamins and minerals, and you can't put a copyright on those. But those specific blend of those that they could, so that's one of the main reasons they would have put that copyright on that in those specific proportions. It is certainly very effective because they're just at effective dosages. So the main thing you want to be worrying about here is just the levels of zinc in your multivitamin and the levels of zinc in Sika Sleep. So just be sure that you're not overdosing the amount of zinc you're taking. Generally, multivitamins have quite low levels of zinc, and the assumption there is that you're getting zinc from your diet, and it depends on what kind of zinc you're taking. Most forms of zinc are pretty well absorbed. There's a few of them which aren't so great. Some of them pass through quite quickly. We've zinc picolinate, which is generally quite good and absorbed very well in terms of the zinc forms available. So just be really conscious of how much zinc is in your vitamin C or in your multivitamin, and compare it then with the zinc in Sika Sleep. Will it affect the effect of Sika Sleep? No, it shouldn't make any difference as long as, of course, you're not overdoing on the zinc. Vitamin C essentially is. It's not, I won't say not a concern, but it's just something that you generally just pace right out.
Yeah.
Most are renally excreted, or if it's dissolved in an aqueous solution, you just pace it out. Magnesium again is similar. It's excreted through the bowels, and you should be fine. Zinc is the only one you might just want to be conscious that you're not getting too much zinc from a multivitamin, but generally they're quite low. We didn't overdo the zinc in this either, as you just want to be consistent with your dosing of zinc and not going absolutely bananas with the amount of zinc.
Matt H has a really good question. So Matt says, "Good morning from California. I work graveyard and my sleep schedule is crap. I either drink 1 or 2 energy drinks or take pre-workout. Will Sika Sleep help my quality of sleep?" So I'll give you an interesting anecdote on this first. Our jiu-jitsu coach, our sensei, is a fireman. So you can imagine what his sleep schedule is like. It's obviously terrible, very, very high stress, like livelihood to make your living off, besides being a fighter and a coach then as well on top of that. The first time Galera took it, he fell asleep and his wife had to come in and wake him up at 10 a.m. in the morning.
Yep.
And he's usually just wakes up straight away, like is kind of straight on it at like 6 o'clock in the morning and can't get back to sleep. So it does seem to help people who work shift work, and it does seem to help people who work in those kind of high stress environments. So I would be very confident in saying this would be a good option for you to try. Definitely with shift workers, there's a lot of research. If you watch Owen's video from last week on the different ingredients, all of these ingredients have kind of extensive studies done on them, and a lot of them have extensive studies done with shift workers. So one of the zinc studies actually was done on a cohort of emergency room nurses, and their sleep quality and sleep duration were both found to have increased when they supplemented with zinc. So we can never say absolutes in saying this is absolutely going to change how you sleep, but I would actually be very confident in saying this would be a great option for you to try.
Keen is asking, lads, how would Sika Sleep differ from zinc and magnesium supplements? So in zinc and magnesium, obviously it's just zinc, magnesium, but we've zinc, magnesium, B6, vitamin C, and salt, which make a significant extra addition to what's needed for sleep. As we say, we didn't put a proprietary blend on this, or we didn't put, we didn't hide what's in it. You can get all these, but we want to make sure that you're able to get them conveniently, get them in a fashion that you could take very, very efficiently, get them, of course, your laptop's going to die. Get them in a form that is for sure from a good quality source. We'll be testing every single batch, which is something that's just not commonly done in the industry. So we'll be testing Sika Sleep every batch. You'll be able to get the results and see from independent testers that we know that Sika Sleep is good quality. And one of the things in the last, definitely in the last kind of year or more, I've just been incredibly paranoid by the quality of supplements you get and where you get them. For example, if you look at, for example, melatonin supplementation, which is over the counter in a lot of countries. Funnily enough, it's not over the counter in Ireland. You can get it recommended from a doctor. That's still not charging. Um, the variance in dosage from melatonin is massive, even in places where it's coming through a reputable source. We're talking plus and minus. So not even underdose supplements. We're looking at overdose supplements. I think some of them, there was like 150% of the prescribed dose on the tablet. So you just want to be super conscious of where you're buying your supplements from, who you're buying them supplements from. Currently, for me, because last year, a lot of you might remember the whole event. I'm not going to bring it up because it's going to be, you know, shocking shit or anything. But we actually got in contact. A lot of you might remember. We talked to the owner of Nootropics Depot, and if I could buy him a supplement now, I will automatically look for Nootropics Depot initially, because we talked to the owner. I know they do in-house testing. I know they have a lab. They have an offshoot, a different company, Omniant Labs now, who do testing for this kind of thing. And I feel a lot more confident when I buy it from those. And I just honestly just won't buy supplements from even the most reputable brands. I'll never buy supermarket brand supplements anymore. They're the cheapest. Almost certainly shit in those, or very little in them, or probably the least useful form. Um, Generally now and Viridian are quite well regarded, so I'm pretty okay with those. But outside of that, if it's an off brand I've never heard of, I just won't use it because it's just as likely to be shit. So I'm probably better off not taking the supplement. So this is one of the big things, is when you're buying from us, is that you know what you're getting. You'll be able to see the results on the website. It's something I'm huge on, and it's honestly flabbergasting. It's mental that like you guys are going to take it. Your mothers could be taking it, your partners could be taking it, your boyfriends could be taking it. There's no way we could sell that
Yeah.
without having done the most basic of testing, as far as I'm concerned, on it, and the most. It's just due obligation, morality, from a moral point of view, for selling it. Have to.
Yeah, 100%.
Imagine, imagine we into manufacturer and we're like, right, as a squat program, and then we never looked at the squat program and just sold it to people.
That's the
That's what it's
problem
like.
as well, is like you can't look at a supplement
Yeah.
and be like, oh, the volume in this is way too high.
Mhm.
You know,
That's essentially what it's akin to.
very regular commenter, Dr. Demographics IE says, what about Sika Sleep on non-athletes? My GF wants to use it. Is the high sodium okay? So it's a really good question. This is one of the massive things we're thinking about as we're developing this supplement. So obviously we're a sports performance company, but to be honest, most of the people, are a large amount of the people we tested this on, were non-athletes as well. So our parents, friends, people we knew who were in shift work, people we knew who had bad sleep quality, and many of these people weren't athletes. So when you look at the amount of sodium that's in this, or the amount of sodium chloride that's in this, it's not in excess of any of the daily limits that would be set by kind of large organizations such as the American Heart Foundation. So it really isn't. It isn't an option. Now, high sodium, so not just high salt, but in particular high sodium, is something which actually in the last 2 or 3 years we've seen a kind of sea change with, in terms of recommendations and in terms of what's coming out in the literature. So this is one of the only cases where the American Heart Foundation actually withdrew their recommendations, was on sodium and salt intake for people with high blood pressure. They have done not a 180 but a kind of retraction on their recommendations around that. It doesn't seem to have the same influence on blood pressure people originally thought. So many of you, if your parents or grandparents in years previously, say 15 to 20 years ago, if they were having any kind of heart issues, the immediate thing would be a sodium-free diet, or as low sodium as you could possibly get. Many of those recommendations now are changing. So much of the kind of up-to-date research on that is very much going in the opposite direction, or just kind of pulling back on that demonization of salt, and in particular sodium. So I would say, Dr. Demographics, is that we are using this in non-athletic populations as well, and the sodium thing really doesn't seem to be an issue. This is definitely an important aspect for you getting good sleep, is that salt supplementation in the kind of hour before you're going to sleep. It's definitely a vital part of the supplement. So I wouldn't be worried about it from that point of view.
Yeah, sodium is essential for, optimal living. It's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
And the general recommendation now is from more reputable sources is kind of between like 2,500 milligrams. There's about 300 and between like 370 390 per dosing of milligrams for this. So it's well within the actual recommendations watch in your diet, and you should be salting your other foods. So we just want to make sure there's enough of this dosage to make an impact. As many of you are taking this, you sweat in a huge amount. And if anyone watched the breakdown the video did, uh, there was NFL athletes or American football players playing 4 hours a day. Some of them were so sweating up to, I think it was like up to like 30 grams of sodium a day. So you excrete sodium in your sweat. Some people are salty sweaters, so they sweat a lot of sodium out when they're training, even just general living. So the sodium dosages are very, very well within in a tolerated limits. Again, literally, as I said, we've given this to people who are inactive women in their 50s and 60s. So it is very, and you'll know if you're a sodium sensitive individual in regards to blood pressure, but no, the sodium isn't a concern. And obviously, that was one thing we were thoughtful of, is that would the sodium put people off, but it is very, very valuable. So we wanted to keep it in to make sure it's actually a beneficial product. The use of sodium in regards to getting to sleep is very, very interesting. There's these enzymes released, basically they're called salt inducible kinases, and they were actually discovered in the 90s when they fed rats these high salt diets, and they're highly interlinked in relation to your circadian rhythm in the brain, and they're very, very, very important. And they're absent in the absence of sodium, so it's very, very important to get them.
OM has a question. He says, "Hi lads, any recommendations for someone that keeps getting DOMs even weeks into a volume phase?" So definitely here, there's a couple of things to look at. It's interesting you say weeks into a volume phase, because typically we think about adaptation to kind of voluminous training as taking anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. So commonly, to take the example of people running the Road to Anywhere squat program, there's some tens at the start of that, as everyone who has ran it will know. And sometimes people need to elongate that initial portion of the program. They need to do 2 extra weeks of the tens and the eights to kind of ramp themselves onto the program, and that's usually absolutely perfect. Now, what I will say is, in your case, OM, where you have repeated incidents of kind of excessive DOMs, and excessive DOMs for me are something that inhibits my ability to replicate a motor pattern as I want to replicate it. So, the example I commonly use would be if I'm squatting twice a week, and for my second squat session, my quads or my back are so sore that muscular inhibition actually doesn't allow me to warm up, or doesn't allow me to move with the motor pattern I want to move with. That's what I would deem to be excessive DOMs. DOMs are part of training, particularly part of hypertrophy training, and hypertrophy training is an essential part of strength training. So DOMs are a part of it, but those excessive DOMs, where we get alterations of motor patterns, might have excessive discomfort, and that changes for everyone. Some people have a weird masochistic love of pain, and they love waking up with that pain in their legs, or they love that kind of burning the next day. But excessive DOMs, what I would initially look at is the overall volume in your training program. Then I would look at the intensity at which that volume is done. And then finally, I would look at exercise selection. So when you look initially at volume, people oftentimes make the mistake of just going ham in their first week of training. So a common first week for squats would be 3 sets of 10, or 4 sets of 10, or 5 sets of 10. That's a lot of volume. When you look at some of the more extreme cases, 10 sets of 10, the kind of German volume training method, 10 sets of 10 for almost anyone, even at reasonable percentages, will murder you. You will be very, very sore. So that's the first place I'd look. Are you reaching too far in terms of the number of sets multiplied by the number of reps? Is that volume too high? Now, in the second case, this is kind of your second area of investigation, is you need to look at the relative intensity at which you're doing that. So intensity and strength training, we usually deem as the weight being the number one limiter or the number one aspect of intensity, but also you can look at rest periods as being a moderator for intensity. You can also look at relative speed or relative power production as a moderator for intensity in strength training. But let's just take weight as being the most simple aspect of this. A lot of people, if you're used to squatting 200 kilos, won't like going to the gym and doing 80 kilos for some sets of 10. They'll say, oh, I know I can do a set of 10 at 110 or 120 or 130. And so I'm going to go and do that set of 10 at 110 or 120 or 130, no matter what happens, because I don't like training with a barbell that's that light. That's grand if you can do it and you don't get that excessive DOMs. But for many people, you're probably going to be starting off those 10s around 40% to 50%. Now, there are some cases, like in more aggressive programs or programs that are very, very specific, we might start their 10s at 60 to 65% of one rep max. But that's the second area I would look at. What is the actual weight you're using for your voluminous periods of training? Now, finally, what you should look at is the exercise selection. So, certain exercises, due to either their loading patterns, you might have very good increments in which you can increase the weight. An example of this would be sandbag carries or farmers walks, where you actually mightn't have that many increments at which you can increase or decrease the weight. And so it becomes difficult to have moderate loading patterns. The second example of this, and this is probably the more applicable one or the more relevant for most people, would be the example of the pull-up. So you go back to a voluminous stage of training, you say, I'm going to start off and do 6 sets of 6 on the pull-up. The pull-up for some people, whether that be through lack of experience, lack of training, or an excess of body weight, the pull-up might just be too high intensity, and no matter what, you're going to feel like you've strained your lats or you'll have some issues around your shoulders in the days following training. That is purely down to your exercise selection. In that case, go and do some ring rows, go and do some lat pull downs, whatever it is, pull or change that exercise selection. That will allow you to make an alteration, have less intensity, have possibly more volume, and then get away with that for a small bit longer. But that would be my 3 recommendations on that.
You know, that's interesting is that the reduction of DOMs doesn't seem to coincide with, or the perceived pain from DOMs doesn't seem to coincide with any recoverability metrics, but it does seem to impact movement because you're perceiving pain when you're moving. So compression garments, interestingly enough, do seem to routinely or consistently give you results in terms of reduction of DOMs. I've never used them. I've never recommended anyone to use them. It does seem to help. Other than that, though, there's a myriad of other things that would probably be more negative impact on your training compared to the slight benefit you'd get from the reduction of DOMs, like some extra steady state work in your training or in your rest days or something like that. So I wouldn't be I'd be just concerned, like they were talking about, in terms of if you have very consistent DOMs. But if you really wanted to, it seems like compression garments do seem to make some difference. But I wouldn't be holding my hat to that. Liam Cunningham says, not Sika sleep related, but was wondering, what do you think of the benefits of sports massage for recovery? Are they worth the money? So I personally think that sports massages are worth the money, or at least in the previous economy, they were worth the money. At the moment, for example, in Ireland, you're looking at paying about €60 for sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, and certainly would not pay every single physical therapist €60 for an hour's massage. There is one person I see, he is an hour away, but he is well worth €60 for an hour. He is an incredibly valuable hour. The only reason I don't use it more regularly at the moment is because I don't have 3 hours on an evening to go see him. If I was very hurt, I would definitely make that time. But currently, the amount I'm training, the business I'm trying to do, and having a family, I don't have the time. If he was closer, I would see him more regularly. Personally, I do think sports massages in a heavy training block are very beneficial. especially to keep a little bit of pain away. It really depends on finances. I don't think they're absolutely necessary. However, if you're training really intensively and you're training a lot, I do think they are beneficial, especially if you're trying to increase range of motion in particular joints. What I'd love to do is, I've talked about my elbows a lot, so you can see my left elbow extension is back perfect. My right elbow is getting there, but it would get there a lot faster if I could just get someone to spend a lot of physical time on this to release it, so I could reinforce this locked out position. And it's something I'd like to do, but I actually just don't have the time at the moment. But I personally think sports massages are very beneficial, especially if you're training a lot. Definitely not necessary, but certainly not to be scoffed at. Like a lot of individual, or not a lot of individuals, but a certain amount of individuals or experts would kind of scoff at them. I don't think they're. I don't think they're a magic fairy thing that doesn't do
No.
anything.
The
Lots of elite athletes do them,
Yeah, that's I was literally
and
just about
have
to
for a
say,
long time.
the thing you need to look at is, so if you look at so say when Irish rugby won yet another uh massive Six Nations, you'll see when they're thanking people at the end, or maybe you watch a documentary on an American football team and the credits come up at the end. Every single professional sports team across almost every sport will have a physiotherapist, and then they'll have either a physical or a massage therapist. And those physiotherapists are there most of the time for guiding people through rehabilitation work or prehab work if they've been injured in the past. But that's the kind of physio's job, is getting people back on the road. That sports masseuse or that physical therapist is there with the athletes every single day. Most of the time before training sessions, they're getting their calves worked out if they're very sore, or they might have a slight niggle in their shoulder and they're kind of warming up that joint and getting ready to go. Miso, when we went to train with Miso had a therapist there with him for every single training session. So success leaves clues is a major thing you need to look at in sport, and sports massage definitely is something that benefits a lot of people. An interesting point that Gerf was talking about there, where gaining range of motion. When I went from playing rugby to weightlifting, or trying to get into weightlifting, I got a session done on my calves and ankles every single Sunday morning for I think 4 to 6 months, somewhere around there. It just so happened the gym I was doing an internship in, one of their coaches was a physical therapist, and Teddy did a phenomenal job of opening up my ankles and basically smashing those tissues out to allow me to then gain that range of motion. So they can be very, very useful. The value judgment thing is a difficult one, like is this worth my money? Is that worth my money? It really depends on where you put your value, and obviously the relative amount of funds you have to throw around. For some people, getting one of those Normatec machines to squeeze out their legs every evening is worth their money, And then for other people, at €25 on a tub of creatine isn't worth the money because of relative
Where are
expense.
you getting creatine for €25 in this economy? The I think that's probably an interesting point, is that a lot of people just assume, and this happens a lot with general population when they see physiotherapists and physical masseuse and stuff. And I'll be the first to say a lot of physiotherapists are a complete pile of shit, and they're not good at their jobs. But the same as any profession. But people will assume that, like, you'll get one treatment and you'll be like, right, that's it didn't fix the problem. Something that's being caused by hundreds or thousands of hours from another activity isn't probably going to be changed from 1 hour of one activity. But that's an issue for the communication from your the person you go see, and unfortunately that can seem like they're trying to upsell you on more frequent treatments. So in a perfect world, I would get a massage probably twice a week.
Jeez, how great would that be?
That'd be unbelievable. But it really is, like Dara said, it is a value judgment, financial one and a time one. But again, if I was someone who's like, this training block is the most important training block, which probably is actually, when I think about it, going to Japan, I should probably get more massages. There we go.
I should definitely have gotten more rub downs last summer when I was running that much and training that much.
What's weird is that, so like, a lot of movement is very beneficial, in the same way that there's a similar kind of mode of action that physical therapy helps with. You can come at them from different angles.
Mhm.
But jiu-jitsu provides a lot of low force movement. So for me, while obviously jiu-jitsu can be quite painful, you're moving your lower body through a lot of range of motion very frequently with high volume, but it's in comparison to squatting 220 for 7 reps, very low intensity. So you get some benefits in that in terms of movement. So motion is a kind of lotion, and they go hand in hand with that physical therapy. But yeah.
RS says BRB getting a refund for Sika pull. Can't believe maybe deadlift twice a week. That's like the exact case I'm talking about, where 8 weeks or 12 weeks you give to your deadlift and give it that kind of specific attention. But if we're looking at long term, you don't want to be just throwing more frequency at the deadlift. The deadlift doesn't, or more specifically, your back doesn't take it too well when you do that. Dr. Demographic says, any coupon codes? Yes. So I posted the coupon code in the thread. We just needed to make sure the coupon code was gone live, obviously. So sleep 10. So SLEEP 10 is live for 10% off. Sleep 10. We just needed to make sure we were all live and good to go with that. So Bernard Yun, says, good question. I was thinking the same thing. Okay. KBC 5150 says, how much damage did Cron Gracie do to BJJ via horrible optics last week?
I don't think he did any damage to BJJ. He just damaged the Gracie name, I think.
Yeah, that's a major point.
Yeah.
Is that
everyone knows you need BJJ for MMA now. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, and I think the street warrior thing in BJJ loses more and more momentum every day, where people are like, I'm just here because it's the best way to fight. Most people doing jiu-jitsu couldn't have less of an interest in fighting someone and it being the most optimal fighting form. There's definitely that cohort out there, but I think that's much more of a thing of people looking from the outside in at jiu-jitsu, is that you're just doing it because it's the best way of fighting someone or the best way of overcoming someone. But I think it's the Gracie name took a bigger hit than anyone else on that. Obviously, the Gracies, it's a massive institution.
But coupled with the lawsuit, the back, obviously that the Gracie name is taking a further hit in that regard, which is unfortunate, because there's obviously great people out there like Hodger, who does a lot of who's got a good reputation and stuff. But it is what it is, I suppose.
It's also
he was ripped though, wasn't he? He's fucking shredded.
Oh yeah. It's also at the point where there's never been more options aside from the Gracies.
That's a great name though, Kron.
Kron.
That's like a fucking villain in Flash Gordon. Ming the Merciless. Kron the Gracie.
Break Strength. That's a great name. Says, have you heard Tadej Pogacar's coach talking about Zone 2 training, how it builds the lactic shuttle system in Type 1 fibers for Type 2 fibers to use? Should more athletes be doing Zone 2 work? So this, what zone you work in, and this goes for both strength athletes and aerobic and non-aerobic athletes, or aerobic and anaerobic athletes. What zone you work in and the amount of work you do in each zone is very specific to the particular task you're doing, right? So moderate, let's just talk about it in terms of moderate, medium, and high intensity cardiovascular work. All of those are important for every athlete, but it's the ratio of work you do in each is the kind of main crux or the main thing a coach should be focusing on. So a lot of coaches do this thing where they'll get hyper specific and they'll say, or sorry, not a lot of coaches, some coaches and some athletes make the mistake of getting hyper specific, and they will say, I only run long distance, so I'm only going to do that very low intensity cardio, and there's nothing to be gained from me doing the other ones. Other coaches will say, we only do sprinting, or we only play rugby, or we only do field hockey. It's all very short, sharp, aggressive bursts of speed, so I should never do low, slow, long distance stuff. In fact, everybody should have their fingers in each of these pies, and then we should focus more depending on where our specific work comes in. Now, if you take, do you know who Tadej Pogacar?
Never heard of him.
I don't know what this athlete competes in. I'm assuming it's some sort of strength or power thing because they're trying to increase that shuttling from Type 1 to Type 2. But if we consider even a weightlifter needs to do some work in all of those
Cycling.
aspects. Is it cycling?
Yes.
Okay. So even a cyclist needs to do some work in all three of those. I don't think they need to be specifically doing work that increases the lactate shuttle system from type 1 fibers to type 2 fibers. I've never heard of that. Um, should you be doing or zone 2 work? Athletes should be doing work in every zone.
Yeah, I definitely think. See, the big problem with that, right, is that if you are let's say you're a really experienced powerlifter now, or you're a moderately experienced weightlifter at the moment, and you are like, oh, zone two would really be beneficial. The problem is if you introduce any zone two or any meaningful steady state cardiovascular work or potentially higher, is that it's probably going to take realistically about a year to 18 months for it to have a meaningful effect and for you to adapt to it enough that you can do enough of that training consistently that it will benefit your athletic training, your sport specific training without impacting it. The problem is if you are a well developed athlete, introducing that in steady state cardiovascular work is going to have a negative impact for a while, or if you introduce it in such a low fashion that it doesn't impact your training, it's going to take a long time for you to get the benefits of that, and eventually you'll have to taper it up into a positive position or to a certain volume before it'll have meaningful effects. So if you're introducing it, you should probably be looking at it, over the course of like a year and a half to 2 years, in terms of your training. Or you take a particular block and you go ham on it, and then you return to your sport and keep it high, which would be very beneficial, but that's not always affordable for athletes. But I definitely think a lot of athletes should be a bit more cardiovascular fit, a bit more healthy, a bit more optimal blood markers, blood pressure, body fat
You know,
percentage.
on specifically on this, right? So you have a cyclist coach talking about building a lactate shuttle system from type 1 fibers to type 2 fibers. This screams quack to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
This is like
yeah. That's immediately what I thought, but I was like, no, maybe not.
this happens quite a lot, right? Where you'll get a coach who has good athletes, might be developing moderate athletes into great athletes, or so the coach might be doing a very good job. They'll look at some mechanistic data, or they'll have a theory and they'll go out there and try and find some data to try and put a scientific spin on what they're doing and why it works. This, to think that this number one cyclist in the world is the best cyclist in the world because his coach has found some sort of lactate shuttling system across fibers, is pretty much ludicrous. Firstly, to think that any one specific aspect of that cyclist training would be the winning factor, whether it be their specific physical training, whether it be their specific psychological training, whether it's their drug protocol, whether it's their nutrition, whether it's their genetics, whether it's the actual bike they're using, whether it's their support team and how their support team allows them to recover better. Any of that, none of that can be the one reason why that person wins. If you're the top cyclist in the world or the top athlete in any sport, any endeavor in the world, it is not because of one thing. It's not because of this one secret sauce. It's not because of this one
Well, it might
system.
be.
It's very unlikely to be. Most of the time, you have a massive handful of things that you're better at than other people. And then all of those things work together to make you the best athlete in the world. You can't really point to any sporting endeavor where you can't look at Lance Armstrong and say Lance Armstrong took more drugs than everyone else on tour. Lance Armstrong took the same drugs, probably the same amount of drugs as everybody else on tour, and he was the best. You also can't point at Lance Armstrong and say he was genetically the best cyclist in the world, and that's why he's the best. Genetically, he was probably incredibly similar to almost everybody else in the world. You can't point to him and say his team of people around him were the best in the world by far. And that's why he was the best cyclist in the world. You can't. You can't say his psychology was better because it wasn't. It's a combination of factors is what makes the difference with athletes. And so this thing, when coaches come out with these weird, convoluted. I'm sure there's loads of studies on this lactate shuttle systems, specifically from cycling, specifically about zone 2. Sure, there's loads of stuff about that, but that's not the reason why he's the best.
You're sounding like you're giving out to
No,
break
no, I'm
strength.
not.
It sounds like you're attacking him
Sorry,
there.
break strength. I have this thing where I go on rants, and it seems like I'm attacking people,
Seems like you're attacking break
or
strength.
so I'm told.
Your tone was very
Break
aggressive
strength.
there.
That's a great question.
It sounded like you were harassing him there, and he was just asking an honest question.
Francesco Theodoli says, "Cheers, Uncle Ruslan, still rocking."
Don't ruin it for me. I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, Dr. Demographics just bought 2 boxes of Sika Sleep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Demographics. We're massively appreciative. Alton Murphy says, tight upper back and overactive lower back for weightlifting. Any tips on getting stronger, more flexible in the upper spine?
I saw such a good fucking one for this.
Go on.
I don't know how to do it. So if you go into a half kneeling position against the wall, don't no me.
Don't no me.
Set it so
He can't hear you.
So I'm going to show you something, right? So half kneeling position wall, like you're going to propose to your girlfriend. Leg that's up against the wall, and then I want you to do this movement. So your hands are here, and then we go down a little bit, still kneeling, and then you bring it across, and then you kind of keep your face wide of the wall, back like this. Come back again.
So you're like sweeping across in front of the wall.
You're staying really close to the wall, and you're coming down, and then you have to come up this way, and then come across the wall. Oh, it's so good for the upper back.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. Again, obviously, then soft tissue work, foam rolling, chin up hangs.
Alton, I was actually just with an osteopath on Wednesday.
What did she give you?
She gave me the same diagnosis.
Oh, but what did she give you to do?
Oh, like a load of movements like that. Load of T-spine mobilization, basically.
What kind of stuff? I want to
know. So my big issue
What are you keeping secrets from us? Tell us. What are the movements?
You have to subscribe to my OnlyFans.
OnlyFits. Go on, what was your biggest issue?
My big issue is up high in she reckons it's from tackles in rugby and doing my AC joints and popping my shoulders so much. So my upper back is like this.
Your biggest issue is you won't do the rehab.
No, I definitely won't do the rehab.
You know?
Okay. Where are we going? Okay. Kieran Hurisky says, is there a coupon code SLEEP10 for 10% off? Is the discount code. Freaky says, cheers, lads.
Freaky.
Supermutt says, suffering from patella tendonitis for a few months now, seems to flare up, particularly for maximal split jerks on the back leg. Any idea as to why this might be? So, Supermutt, we have a no injury question policy. Me or Owen, surprisingly enough, aren't doctors and we're not physiotherapists. So we just don't answer injury questions as to how to fix them. I'm going to give you a one-line answer on this. So Aaron Horshig from Squat University, one of our first big podcast guests, we went and met Aaron. And when we were talking to Aaron, we said, knee tendonitis is one of the biggest afflictions weightlifters have. Weightlifting is basically about hurting your back and getting sore knees. And he said it is almost always a loading issue. So volume loading issue. Too many sets or too many reps or too much weight on the barbell is the issue with knees. So I can't go into it anymore. We're not liable. We're not able to answer your injury questions. So that's what I will say on that. B says, my question about the Huberman protocol was deadly serious. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing that, there will be absolutely nothing wrong with you doing Sika Sleep in the evenings as well.
Just check what's in Athletic Greens. I know there's a fuck ton of stuff in Athletic Greens, but I don't think there's zinc in there, but just have a check there and just make sure there's not a massive overlap of zinc.
Alex Arkila says Lane Norton ?
I don't know.
Connor Mullen says 12 singles tonight, boys. Big Friday. Good luck, brethren. Good luck to you, Connor. I hope you smash those weights. Len Ken says, I've seen some S&C coaches recommending trap bar deadlifts for BJJ athletes. Do you think they are useful? My main BJJ athlete at the moment, or one of them, has trap bar deadlifts. I think they are useful. One of the big issues with BJJ is people roll so much. They're constantly rolling. At least every day. Most of them roll more than once a day. And in that case, it's very, very difficult for you to do high bar back squats and deadlifts and other stuff. So one of my athletes at the moment has strap bar deadlifts because it allows us to cross off a few boxes. It is a kind of between two stools things. Is it a squat? Is it a deadlift? Who knows? But it allows me to get him doing some large bipedal lower body exercise that gets a lot of weight loaded through his spine once a week, and it is an effective tool in that case. Is it a replacement for the back squat and or the deadlift? No, but it is a useful case in those instances. I think some coaches recommend using the trap bar deadlift because it's just easier for them to get people into a good position, which undoubtedly it is. You don't have the barbell getting in our way. It's a much easier position to coach and get people to do than the barbell deadlift is. But it's not quite as effective as training the posterior chain as the barbell deadlift is. But it's a very good tool for what it's being used for. Is it the ultimate tool for BJJ athletes? No. But nothing is.
The sort of question I was asking later. No, I've seen some blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so on the BJJ thing, it's quite interesting. Is that a lot of people who train combat athletes specifically, but all athletes fall into the trap of assuming that we need to do like athletic gym endeavors to train them in their sport rather than doing traditional strength and conditioning work with them. And traditional, when you say the word traditional, you make it sound like it's an antique, you make it sound like it's ineffective, but it's traditional for a reason because it's very effective, and it just needs to be done.
But I like to call it as actual S&C.
Actual S&C, yeah. People generally avoid actual S&C with especially combat sports athletes, but to be honest, all of the athletes. Yeah, so I would like pretty much everyone to train like collegiate football players. That is definitely one of the most effective ways to produce power. And you should go watch the power sports video I did a couple of weeks ago on the subject to get a bit more in depth on it, because it's all about strength, muscle mass, and strength, and do your sport. We don't need to recreate our sport in the gym. And we see a lot of nonsense in combat sports athletes training, particular.
A lot of nonsense. Connor says Hugo's asking the right questions. Eugene Poon says, do you brush your teeth pre or post Sika sleep?
Pre. Post, not pre.
Yeah, I like doing a post. I have a box of Sika sleep next to my bed, and I just bring up a little glass of water with me when I'm going. Yeah, and inevitably I end up stirring it with a pen that's next to my bed, because you never have a little teaspoon in the bedroom. Okay, John Shields. John Shields, who the OG listeners will remember was a guest on the podcast.
John is a great friend of ours, but you know what? I know John's messing, but there's actually two things that will actually help with and Sika sleep. So zinc is related to testosterone levels. So obviously testosterone and erection quality is tightly linked, but also activated B6 lowers prolactin in men, which is why you shouldn't take activated B6 if you're breastfeeding, because it will reduce the amount of breast milk you put out. But that lowered prolactin is essentially the thing that the hormones released after you have intercourse, after you roll with your partner, and that's when everything relaxes, if you know what I mean. Don't want to get too in depth here in the video, but prolactin, that's one of prolactin's actions in men, is to lower that state of arousal, and B6 helps reduce that. So it should actually help with that as well. So
for those of you who didn't see what John's question was, John Shields said, will Sika sleep help my erectile dysfunction? Tom Miller says, call that witch doctor. She'll magic you right. I definitely am going to. Okay. Emilio says, we need a Q&A or an interview with Anton. We do.
Yeah.
Definitely. Nemo 2661 says, why did I have to enter my shitty total in order to get Sika sleep? Dr. Demographics. What was the name of that fellow good at communicating science? Alex who? So it's Alex Keikel, Kikel. Very, very good. A lot of stuff on pharmacokinetics, and biochemistry. Very, very interesting guy to listen to.
Let me see. I'll just get his Instagram there.
Kieran Huriski says, "Can I stack Sika sleep with D-ball?" Alex Keegle will be able to tell you that. Max Offerman says, "Just got to Comedy Athlete program, and maybe you can soothe my nerves. The weight seems really low, even in the later weeks, like 5 reps in reserve. I'm used to training pretty close to failure most of the time." So this is actually a really common question we get. What I will say, Max, on this is trust the program. This program is written with combat athletes in mind, but particularly combat athletes who do a bit of strength training. So a lot of the time people, and this isn't just a combat athlete program, a lot of the time people get our programs and they say these relative percentages are really low. In many cases, people who are asking these questions are used to going to the gym and going almost to failure. You know, they're really feeling like they're hitting training quite hard. That isn't, you should not be staggering out of the gym every time you go to the gym. Now, you will hear different people from different sports or different applications of strength training talking about that need to go to failure. Particularly, we're talking about bodybuilders here. In athletic endeavors, all of our strength training is there as an additive process to our actual sport itself. So everything we're doing is making you better at your particular combat sport. And so if we were to go to failure, if we were to be stumbling out of the gym every time, firstly, you have a negative impact on the actual adaptation you're trying to achieve, because you don't need to be going to absolute failure and breaking yourself down every time. But then, secondly, we have this temporary dip in performance in our actual endeavor. So, in our actual sport, whether that's Muay Thai, whether that's kickboxing, whether that's jiu jitsu or grappling, any of those things, we need our training to be tailored around the actual endeavor. So, Max, do not be concerned by that in any way, shape, or form. I guarantee you this will be a very, very good period of training for you. Don't be worried about the low relative intensity of those programs. There's many, many people running those programs to very good effect.
Max, but if you, for example, want to push your squat a bit more, what you can do is email us and we'll put in a different max for your squat. So it will bump up the squat a bit more so you can push it. Generally, we don't want combat athletes because they won't stop doing their sport when they do this. And it is hard to do the squat and your sport a lot. But if you do, just email us. We'll get you a different max. We'll have a look at the program and give a more appropriate or a more intensive squat max, and hopefully that can push it there. So don't be stuck. Definitely reach out an email. Hungover chat. How much zinc? Oh, Silver Simon. Oh, interesting question. So if you look, right, if you see on supplements and if you see on different things, you'll see a quantity of zinc, but the amount of zinc you actually get from that depends on what form it's attached to. If you look at Sika Sleep, so you get an effective dose of about 6 milligrams, which is more than enough on a daily basis, given that you'll be eating food and stuff. So it's recommended. Generally, the upper recommendation is between like 30 and 40 milligrams of zinc. You don't want to be overdoing it. You'll know if you overdose zinc because you'll feel nauseous, you'll get sick. Like it's not something it's not something you do by accident. And the zinc overdose isn't theoretically. If you overdose zinc for a long time, you get a copper deficiency. Copper is a micronutrient that is easily gotten if you're eating anything but ultra processed food. So in reality, I don't think there's a concern in that regard. But you'll see in Sika Sleep, there's a single digit serving of actual zinc with it. So I know when you look at the packet, there is 30 milligrams of zinc gluconate, but of effective zinc, you're getting 6 milligrams, which is more than enough for a consistent dose to be taking every night. If for some reason you're taking 50 milligrams of zinc a day, that's certainly the upper limit. Certain people will recommend that dosage of zinc for men trying to increase their testosterone, etc., like that. It doesn't seem to cause any issues. I certainly don't recommend that. If you want to do that, you can go investigate it and see what you think you should take. But just be conscious, if you're getting more than 50 milligrams of zinc or 40 milligrams realistically a day across all your supplements and food, then you're probably okay. But you don't really see that in reality, people getting that. Most multivitamins have quite low levels of zinc, and you don't really get zinc in other things like for example, added greens or something like that. So you'll know if you're taking zinc. Zinc rich foods are not the most common ones, or not the ones that you'll overconsume generally. Meat, for example, or certain seeds, or plants or nuts. And depending on who you listen to, the amount you actually absorb from those is in question. Um, but try keep it under 30 to 40 milligrams a day. Just be conscious. It's hard to know how much zinc you're getting depending on the form. So look at what form you're taking in your, for example, if you're taking a multivitamin, for example, just be conscious, but you'll know because you'll puke everywhere or something.
Rui Braga says, is there any discount code for Sika Sleep? Yeah, it's Sleep 10. SLEEP10. Matt H says, thanks, guys. I'll definitely check it out. Nemo says, when is Sika Sinazanol coming out? I want to be Sinazanol demon like Uncle Lydia.
Here, I think this is one of my last great unanswered questions in terms of things I need to know about weightlifting. Because I've learned a lot over the last decade, but the dosages athletes take is just something I need to know. I just need to know.
Because they all lie.
They all lie about it. And I just want to know, what was the actual dosages? Because if you ask me, I reckon in Ilya's big preps, he was taking a fuck ton of gear. Like, I mean, a fucking boatload of gear.
Yeah.
I don't think he was like if you take, like, Joe Sullivan recently was talking about how he just uses this much gear and then he does lots of other things around that to maximize the use of that in training, and it goes really well. I don't think he was doing that. I think like Ilya in these big preps was taking so much fucking gear,
Yeah.
and I'm just so interested in seeing, like, was it like in season bodybuilder dosages, or was it like fucking 50 kilo hurdler dosages? I just really want
I
to
think
know.
it's what I would class it as is early 80s Russian track and field star dosages. Like volatile dosages.
If I ever go back to Kazakhstan, I meet Ilya, like, just get him really drunk and be like, Ilya,
Yeah.
come on,
How much?
how much do you
Is
take?
it this much?
Yeah.
Or this much?
Or was it like
This much?
this much? Stop me when.
Yeah. Okay, Skate961 says, in the snatch, I've gotten to the stage where I have a very fast turnover getting under the bar. However, I notice my overhead position during the catch has gotten weaker. I've tried to combat this by being more active with my arms and continuous pulling under with my shoulders. But when I do this, I sacrifice my speed that I had. Is there a sweet spot to using the arms and dropping under? So, Skate, what I would say is there's two things going on here. There's more than likely two things going on here. The first thing is you probably need to be doing specific overhead strength work. So this is starting with the strict press. Then once you have a reasonable strict press, or possibly at the same time, then going on to behind the neck snatch grip pressing, behind the neck snatch grip push pressing, and obviously snatch balancing. Many times when we see people having this kind of disparity between, they can either get under the bar really quickly or they can be really controlled and really press out with the bar. Most of the time we see that happening, it's because they have a muscular weakness in that overhead position and they just need to train themselves around that. The second thing you need to do is make sure you don't start limiting that speed. Make sure you don't start limiting that aggression as you're getting underneath the bar. So that ability to get underneath the bar is absolutely massive, and it cannot be understated how important it is. So don't somehow kind of limit your thing. No, I'd say it'll die straight away if we plug it out. Don't somehow limit there's a USB thing there if you want to plug in. Don't somehow limit your ability to progress long term in the snatch by just trying to kind of really muscle that bar overhead. You need to prioritize the speed and getting under the bar. You'll see the success of the Italian team in the last 5 years by really prioritizing the speed of getting underneath the bar. But concurrently to that, make sure you're doing your actual strength training. Make sure you're developing the overhead strength, getting bigger, juicier shoulders, getting a bigger upper back. All of that will really, really help. I'll draw a parallel between this and a question we answered earlier. But when someone earlier was asking about what do I need in terms of strength numbers to snatch 100 kilos, you should be thinking about the same way as this for your stability overhead, right? So if you can snatch balance 100 kilos, you can have enough overhead strength to snatch it, right? That technically or theoretically, That is true. But it's much, much better, and you will have a far more stable snatch at 100 kilos if you can snatch balance 110 or 120 kilos. So overall, building that strength and having far greater overhead strength will make you a much more stable, much more repeatable, and a much more consistent weightlifter um, in the long run. Okay, Jake says, made 3 by 8 at 142 kilos. Very, very good. Well done on that. So I assume you're referring to week 4, day 2 of the Road to Anywhere squat program. Um, got to week 5 and I got a neurovirus and lost 2 kilos body weight. Shit, I hope you're doing all right. I hope your recovery is going well. He says he made 3 by 3 at 150, but now I'm worried I won't make 5 by 5 at 150. Wish me luck and weight gain. So Kieran Huriski just says, just do it, Jake. Um, Jake, you can go ahead and attempt that. I have every confidence that you'll be able to do it. But what I will say is we have a rule of thumb with the programs, particularly with the standalone strength programs. So squat program, pull program, press program, bench program. When you miss 1 week of training, we recommend regressing 1 week. So in this case, you had just finished week 4, day 2. If you then missed a week of training because of that, you should go to week 3, day 2 and restart the program. So restart the program. You don't need any reduction in loading or anything like that if you missed 1 week of training. If you missed 2 weeks of training, you regress 2 weeks. And if you missed anything longer than 2 weeks, you restart the block. This is all with the caveat that you didn't lose a massive amount of body weight. In your case, you probably lost 3%. 3%. I don't know if that's correct. 4%, sorry, of your total body mass, which is pretty significant. It's not crazy big, but it is pretty significant. So if you had lost a significant proportion of body mass, then you would have to just restart the block. But I have every confidence that you can go and do it.
Where
Horse says Sika sleep, but they're both awake. What the fuck? Marcus Marquin
right.
says, what do you guys think about power naps in the middle of the day? Would it be beneficial to carve out 30 minutes to an hour for a nap, or should I just use that time to eat more calories? So there's a couple of things to think about here. Firstly, power naps are really, really useful if you have optimized the sleep you're getting at night and you're able to sleep all the way through the night. Power naps are great. More sleep is better. More is better in terms of sleep. But if you're somebody who struggles to get to sleep at night, if you're somebody who struggles to stay asleep at night, or you're somebody who struggles with overall sleep quality, the nap isn't ideal, right? It tends to be a stopgap, but it can actually limit our ability to get to sleep and have good quality sleep when we are asleep at night. So if you're somebody who kind of uses it as a band-aid, then it really isn't ideal. If you had a case where maybe you had to stay late at work or you're a shift worker and you got kind of moved around, a nap can be beneficial as a band-aid in those cases. But if you're using it to make up for poor quality sleep when you're doing your actual big block of sleep, it's not ideal. Now, in the case of an athlete who's training a lot, naps are super useful. So I do like people to get like a 30 to 40 minute nap in the middle of the day if they possibly can. But you just need to be cognizant that it mightn't always be a beneficial thing.
There's some, not sure how many studies there is, but I remember reading a study before on naps during the day, and I think it was done on, I think it might have been Spanish workers who took siestas regularly, is that it seems like napping during the day or napping after a meal is actually negative, has a negative impact on your insulin sensitivity, which is quite interesting. Now, if you're an athlete training all the time and you have a lot of muscle mass, you're probably okay. But there's always something that stuck with me. I remember reading that at work before when I should have been in work. Horace has said, thoughts on Glenn Penley's idea of EMOB workouts with snatch, clean and jerk at 80% for 20 lifts. EMOB each provides both volume and technique work. Yeah, so I'm a pretty big fan of EMOB work when it's called for. A lot of times I'll give it to people if they have a lot of issue when it comes to clerking lifts. So you get someone who's routinely clerking lifts, it's a really good way of getting someone out of their own head just to go, okay, go, and they finish a lift and they don't have time. Generally, it's a minute since the finish of the lift, not so much every minute on the minute, which is kind of a CrossFit thing. It's a minute's rest essentially between the lifts. But I do quite like it. I wouldn't generally get to 80% for 20 singles, but would start quite light compared to that. But I do think it's quite useful, and it is very useful to build a bit of work capacity at certain stages. Nemo said, "Saw him and Sash 3 times a week. All else is bullshit. Clock off." Yeah, but Clock off didn't talk about the amount of trend he was taking either. Doctor Demographics. He's a cyclist. Oh yeah, he's saying cyclist. He's also a freak in his juice stuff. He's Mickey. He's doing things that haven't been done since the 70s, and we know what those ways are on. Fuck.
He said his name is Ingo San Miguel. He's head of performance at UAE Team Emirates, a sports washing team. He's sus as fuck. He's been cycling for years and is bald, which is overall sus.
Who's that?
Some guy.
The retarded Rambo said top 3 detective movies, both of you. Top 3 detective movies.
Firstly, Sicario 1 and Sicario
Hot
2.
Fuzz is a detective movie.
Hot Fuzz then is number 3.
Hot Fuzz is number 1 detective movie. Sicario aren't on my list.
I love Sicario.
I'm
not detective movies for me really don't do it.
I
love crime thrillers.
Does A Time to Kill count as a detective movie? I don't think it does. What about Jackie Chan movies? He's a detective.
Prisoners.
He's a detective in a lot of those.
Do the Jake Gyllenhaal movie Prisoners, where it's like a child gets kidnapped, and they basically like
that's a
fathers.
Yeah,
two fathers kidnap.
I don't think I put that in my top 3, but I would certainly put. I love Jake Gyllenhaal, so I'm going to say Hot Fuzz number 1. A Time to Kill, I suppose, is more of a legal thriller rather than a detective movie. Shutter Island kind of counts.
Shutter Island that's a thriller though. It's not really. I suppose it is detective.
The whole thing is a detective story, you know. They don't make detective movies anymore, really, do they?
Lads, if there's something I love watching, it's really tense, like crime thrillers.
I feel like there's an obvious one we're not thinking of. There's Lethal Weapon. He's kind of a detective.
I don't like those.
You don't like those?
I also don't like Jackie Chan movies.
Right. But you don't like Lethal Weapon?
Nah, not really.
What about...
It's a bit too cringy.
What about what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, stop the live stream a second. You don't like Lethal Weapon?
I actually don't know.
What about any 80s and 90s action movies?
No.
You don't?
I like some of the 90s ones, but I don't. Anything with Steven Seagal in it, no.
What about Bruce Willis?
Like the Die Hard.
Yeah? You don't like Die Hard?
Not really. I don't mind Die Hard. I do like Die Hard.
I think Sika Strength has just become insolvent. I think we're just have to disband the company. This has gotten weird. Oh my god! I thought you think you know someone for probably a decade, and then they come out and say things like that, and you might as well says you
is it
or a slave trader in a past life. Fucking hell. He doesn't like Lethal Weapon or Die Hard, lads.
I just really like psychological thrillers.
Honestly, now I would have thought you'd like those as well, but now I'm actually...
I like I would watch Die Hard. Lethal Weapon, I would probably turn it off.
Fucking hell. Jesus Christ. Shut it all down. Shut it
down.
Close it down.
Philly says,
yes.
Is it normal to nearly die 4 times by the second week of RTA? Yeah, if your work capacity is terrible, you're probably in that group we talked about earlier where you might need 2 extra weeks of the first 2 weeks. So if you are nearly dying in those 2 sessions, rerun the first 2 weeks. Just do it again. Same weights, same load. If you know you were going into that situation, you would do week 1 minus 10%, then week 2 minus 10%, then week 1 at loaded, week 2 at loaded. But yeah, rerun it if you're really struggling with the volume work. And we say this all the time. So if you imagine training as being a triangle with your main base being made up high volume work, and then the top of the triangle being those 3s, 2s, and 1s, you can extend that base as much as you want. You can make that base bigger and wider and more sessions, more volume, more time. And that's great. You can't extend the top of the triangle. You can't put one of those big spires like they put on top of the Empire State Building to make it the tallest building in the world. You can't do that with training. You can't just elongate the top, but you can make that base as big and as wide as possible. And it all seems to be additive. So more of that would be great if you are nearly dying. Break Strength says, thanks, lads. Great to hear your perspective. Frontier says, hey, Owen, I'm not here at all, Frontier. It's grand. There's no need to address dairy.
Yeah, well, apparently you're not a real person because you don't like
Says
Die
not
Hard.
asking for medical advice. Any question says not asking for medical advice. It's asking for medical advice.
It's worse than as well. I'm worse
Just
Sika sleep.
curious how you avoid injury with such frequent training with heavy weights, especially for snatch and shoulder or hip health.
I don't. Is the main answer
Yeah.
is I don't avoid injury. I get hurt as much as the next person. Currently, right now, my IT band hurts. My elbow hurts. My shoulder kind of hurts. Um, do my knees hurt?
Your
Like
knees are surely good enough.
within the tolerance of actual knee pain, they don't hurt. So the answer is I actually don't avoid them. It just is just the nature of the training. Is like I do get sore. But I do a good job of just training anyway and do my best to. I've gotten very good at adjusting to things, and trying to and mitigating factors and rehabbing things quickly and doing what I need to do over the years because I've learned a lot about myself. I would think, but the answer is my hips have never hurt. So I mean, there's that. Yep. What are you laughing at?
Mandy just quoted directly from Hot Fuzz. Goes, "You ain't seen Bad Boys 2?" Oh my god!
You ain't seen Bad Boys. You ever point your
You
gun
ain't
in?
seen Bad Boys 2?
You ever point your gun in the air and go, "Arr"?
Aaron McKinnon, long time Sika Stan resident, says, "Will you do coaches react technique analysis on the Korean weightlifting all video?" Definitely. We saw you sent that in, Aaron. We'll definitely do that at some point. At the moment, it's just trying to get time.
See, the horse program was finished 2 days ago, but obviously Sega Sleep took precedent. But that Sega Horse will be out soon.
Kind of thick says RTA maintenance took me from 150 to 160. Nice. That's great. Great work.
Kind of thick, kind of fat.
Any updates on Sika Horse? As Gareth said, it will be out soon. Break Strength says he didn't feel attacked at all. Please don't worry. Appreciate you giving up your time. We appreciate you joining in.
Willie said we should have seen Rosalind. He pulled it so slow. I must watch that later and see what my boy Anthropoff as a 109.
What's the try pull it slower thing from?
From us.
Is it from us?
Yeah.
From us doing a reaction video.
Yeah, I'm watching Yang Ji.
Ah, yeah.
How do you not remember that?
You know what my memory is like.
Where have we gone? Have you thought about doing a podcast with Blaine McConnell? No, we haven't done an athlete podcast since Shane Hunt, which is probably about a year ago now. And I was only thinking about the other day that I think we need to get back into getting some athletes on the podcast.
Blaine would be a great guest as well.
I'd prefer if we could do podcasts in person. But really, I think the next step is ideally we'll get the person to video them talking separately with recording their own audio separately, because the Zoom quality is fine once you attach a mic and stuff, but I think there's a minimum requisite for audio quality that we should be aiming for. And unless the person can do that, which they actually can do with just literally their phone and potentially a different mic, and most people have a mic now these days, or most people we'd be interviewing. So in the future, I want to make sure we can set it up in that regard. If you watch Chris Williamson, what's his thing? I don't know what his thing is. Chris Williamson, what's his podcast called?
I don't know, Modern Philosophy?
Something. Anyway, he gets people to do that. And he's in his own room, but quality turns out really well on the people he gets to do that. Now, he doesn't get everyone to do that, but it does turn out really well consistently. So that's, I think, once we get back into getting someone on the podcast.
Adam B says, will we see Thursdays in Kazakhstan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The raw footage is on my computer.
Can the RTA be run with a normal weightlifting program 2 to 4 sessions per week? Yeah, it can, removing any squatting from the normal program, of course. Yeah. So firstly, you just take all back squats out and you do your back squats as prescribed by the RTA. Secondly, you make sure you fit the accessories in a way where it doesn't clash. So, for example, if you have accessories like assisted pistol squats in your program, then make sure they're not clashing with the assisted pistol squats that are in the RTA. And then lastly, with the front squats, you might be front squatting once a week. Front squatting once a week is absolutely fine. You can keep that in your normal weightlifting program, but you should limit the weight lifted to the 1 rep max of your clean and jerk. So you'll have to pull back the front squat, or you might have to pull back the front squat loading slightly. You can still keep it in there. But yeah, loads of people do that. A person Uh,
Right.
Loads of people do it.
Um, we need to
Okay, so
wra-
thank you so much for everyone who tuned in.
wrap her up.
There's a discount code SLEEP10 for 10% off your order of Sika Sleep. If anyone has any questions, email us. Seekastrength@gmail.com is the best place to contact us. Messaging us one-to-one on Instagram really doesn't work too well because loads of those just get screened out into a kind of
Well, no,
waiting
message the
box.
Seek Strength Instagram.
Message the Seeker Strength Instagram or email us is absolutely the best way to get in contact with us. If you have any questions, if you have any troubles or woes or anything like that.
Alex Karankatsanis is I've been jumping from injury to injury for the past 4 or 5 years. Every time I get close to anything slightly heavy in training, I know you're not medical professionals, but as SSC coaches, how do you see it? I think the biggest thing, and this is the thing I'm most convinced of currently, the biggest problem with most people when it comes to making their own progress is not their lack of genetics, it's not their lack of dedication to training, it's that they can't get out of their own way to do the things they need to do to improve. They can't figure out what it is they need to be doing, and they need to. And when they do, they're not able to implement it because they have their ego is in the way. And I'm not talking about brash ego. I'm talking about this attachment to certain styles of training or certain thought processes, or they can't get out of a certain thought process. They're stuck in a loop in their own training. And I think this is probably the most thing I'm convinced of, in that most people's progress is held back not by their ability, but by their inability to just do what they need to do to get better. A lot of people just don't possess their ability to go in, focus on one thing, do what needs to be done, no more or no less, find the resource they need to do, put themselves in those situations that need to be done. So when it comes to this is kind of my thought currently. Uh, it's getting everything right is the issue here. Now it is simply said, but there's obviously a lot of moving parts and variables. You know,
That's
you need to get the right advice, the right information, and implement it. You know, and it's hard.
I think the right advice and the right information has never been more accessible to more people.
Mm-hmm.
When Garf is talking about getting in your own way as well, like, and doing what needs to be done, a massive amount of that isn't that, oh, you won't go ahead and do the hard work, you won't put in enough sessions. A lot of that is you just won't listen to people telling you, no, you don't need to do this, or no, you need to do something different, or any of these things. You know, like it's very important that you trust the person you get your information from, and then you do what they tell you to do.
Yes. Oh, like at the
Absolutely.
moment, I have Anton helping me weightlifting, Alex helping me with my nutrition. You know,
And you never question those two lads.
no,
Never.
no.
It's the same way thing I do with jiu-jitsu. I absolutely
Oh, jiu-jitsu coach, sure.
follow to a T
Mm-hmm.
what the lads tell me to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never, it is not within, I've been professionally coaching for a long, long time, more than 10 years now. And I have a vast knowledge of biomechanics, biochemistry, sport and exercise science. I never once question what those people tell me to do. You need to find someone you trust, intake all of their information, and then follow it as if it is a religion. My number one piece of advice.
Thank you to everyone who ordered Seek Sleep. We really appreciate it. I'm very confident it'll help, and I'm very much looking forward to people getting their hands on it and hopefully assisting in your quality of sleep. You know, we don't bring out products or programs or merchandise unless we think it's really good and it's worthwhile and it's impactful. And this is no different than anything else. So if this goes well, we might see 1 or 2 more supplements, particularly a Sika Stim. But currently, Seek Sleep is our main priority, and we are very much looking forward to everyone getting a go with it. And I really hope, and I'm really confident, we're really confident that we'll make a meaningful impact. Thanks for watching, guys.